Hello and welcome to this edition of A Conversation With. I'm Jim Marshall of the New Bedford Cable Network, and we have a group of folks in here today as we talk about the dangers of social media, especially for the young folks out there. Reverend Dave Lima is joining us. He is the Executive Minister of the Interchurch Council of Greater New Bedford. I want to make sure you get this right, Sam. Samantha Willis.
You got it.
And I'm going to let you give your title there because it's a long one.
Absolutely. So my title is CSEC Manager. I'm at the Children's Advocacy Center of Bristol County. And that acronym CSEC stands for the Commercial Sexual Exploitation of Children.
And our final guest is our friend, Dr. Kathleen McKenzie, who I found out is retired, and I was going to say from the New Bedford Public Schools because that's all I know you is for 100 years.
Yeah.
So thank you all for joining us. Dave called me about this topic because there was a film being shown, and I know it's being shown again. As we're recording it, it actually is being shown tonight, but the topic is certainly long past tonight as well, the dangers of social media, and you were talking about for kids. So I'll let you start because you're the one that broached me about this.
Sure.
But talk about the movie itself and why it was being featured in New Bedford a couple of times and what we hope to gain down the road.
Well, the documentary is called Can't Look Away. And the reason it came to New Bedford, quite frankly, is the work that we do. I'm the chairman of the Greater New Bedford Suicide Prevention Coalition. Dr. McKenzie and the Children's Advocacy Center has worked with us in the past, along with a lot of the different organizations here. And it's all about raising awareness and protections around suicide. You know, as we are getting ready right now, we're talking about a very national suicide that just occurred this morning. A football player for the Dallas Cowboys that on Sunday had his first touchdown, a defensive player. Everything looked great. And yet today he took his own life. We don't know the whys, we don't know the wherefores. The thing is for us, it's always about raising awareness. And in the last half dozen years, we have had different documentary companies that offer us opportunities to air a film. This one, Can't Look Away, is about the dark side of social media. It actually is documenting a court case that's traveling through our courts right now where parents are talking about how they've lost their children due to some of the things that they have gotten involved with online during some of the different social media apps. And I want to make sure we say right up front, we're not telling people social media is, stop it. I'm not telling you it's evil. You couldn't stop it right now if you wanted to. But we want parents to be aware of what can happen. In this particular case, again, because of what we do with suicide prevention, parts of it is highlighting where kids who had gone through emotional loss, this one teenager who had lost his girlfriend, and he was seeking quotes. You know how on social media you can find memes of encouragement and all this other stuff. And what also, as he was doing that, it took a dark turn. And all of a sudden, instead of, encouragement, as he was responding, talking about how he felt, what the girl did and how he did that, how it made him feel, all of a sudden it started going in a different direction. It started talking about she's no good, the only way to feel better, take your own life. I'm paraphrasing now. And a few days later he did, after going a lot of this. What a lot of people don't realize, and that's what the documentary talks about, is they operate off algorithms. Everybody's got social media on their phones, or a computer, wherever. But how do you get it? How do they make money? Because they're making billions.
Right.
They make money because advertisers check to see how many clicks when somebody follows a line of memes. You're on something and then you click to get to the next thing and you click to get to the next thing. That's like the Nielsen ratings was for us when we were watching TV. How many people are watching? That's how they set their advertisement rates. And so this is the danger, because what the documentary is showing, people are aware of it, but they're denying it because this is how they make their money.
You've been in the schools a long time, and when you probably first started, this wasn't even an issue.
Nope, not at all.
I'm curious from your standpoint, how quickly this has become an issue And it's all ages, it seems.
It's all ages. So I first became aware of it sort of with the students that I was working with directly in 2017. And I really started saying, what the heck is going on? What's going on with these kids? So I know it hit the higher grades sooner,
Yep.
right? But that's when elementary age kids started getting phones, and you started seeing them coming in. And I was starting to see kids talk about, oh, I feel depressed. And I say, well, why? My mom took my phone away, right? I would be running groups, and the kids would be trying to bring their phones into group, and they'd be talking about different things on, either gaming or social media, but it's all connected. I started seeing some very significant behavioral changes at that time. And like I said, it probably impacted middle school and high school earlier than that, but that's when I started seeing it in elementary school.
Was there still the depression and the anxiety? I mean, just teenagers go through that. I mean, even before you noticed, like early in your career, were you still seeing the same issues without the social media?
So,
Probably not at the young age, though.
no, I would say technology, since I think we're in an environmental crisis right now in terms of the rapid changes in the environment, and I'm talking about because of technology.
Yeah.
Right? And these technological devices, whether it's computers, laptops, iPads, cell phones, all of that, kind of invaded our homes. There was no, warning labels on them or whatever. I think there's a couple of different components to it, right? And I've talked a lot in the past. The people who've seen me speak before have heard me talk about the sleep deprivation that comes.
Did a whole series on it here, yeah.
That comes along with it. But I think the piece that I really haven't talked about a lot is sort of the addictive piece of it, and how it's really the addiction that leads to the sleep deprivation, because kids can't get off of their devices. And even when I did the sleep challenge at the schools, we found, and Dr. Englander up at the Mark Center found the same percentage, right? That 70 to 80% of kids, like 70% of boys, 80% of girls, go back online when parents think they're sleeping. So, so I think also there's that piece, and then there's also, because kids are doing these things, a lot of these things at night, right, when parents are sleeping, it's, they're not getting supervised. They're more likely to get in trouble online if they're doing it during unsupervised times.
The stat that I found was amazing when I was looking at, I guess the Pew Research did a stat on it. 95% of kids 13 to 17 use social media during the day. And 33 of them are on it constantly, meaning 5 hours or more, which I found, where do you get that time to do that? But that's just amazing. Your job, you probably get kids after they've been referred by Dr. McKenzie, you're seeing kids in when they're in real trouble.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So my job as CSEC manager is to handle all of our referrals that fall under this really large legislative umbrella in Massachusetts, including all the way to human trafficking cases, sort of the traditional model, but also all of the kids who are using those phones, that social media, to send inappropriate images back and forth to each other. So we do get a lot of referrals from the school system where you guys are seeing that kind of occur. And we're seeing that start as young as 8 is a pretty common age range, all the way from 8 to 18 for my referrals. So I'm seeing it in a lot of kids who are at the schools every day using their technology for ill.
And what do they say to you when they're talking to you? They're obviously, I don't want to say in crisis, but they're in crisis mode, it sounds like, when they get to your point. What are they saying to you?
That's actually really challenging for us even to get them in front of us for like a full forensic interview or what the case may be. A lot of times we're navigating conversations with parents who don't see the concerns to the same extent that we as professionals might see those concerns. So we're not even necessarily seeing our kids come in for a full interview to explain to us where they're at. And there's a lot of resistance for being separated from their phones, for having law enforcement be able to do any follow-up right from the get-go. There's still that resistance.
There's a lot of things. The negative impacts include mental health, as we talked about, addiction, which you just touched upon, exposure to inappropriate, harmful content, predators, privacy, data vulnerabilities, disruption of sleep, and other offline activities. It's scary when you think of that. But there's also benefits, and that's, everything is going more online. Even schools are. And from your point as an educator, that's got to be a hard balancing act to deal with.
It is. I have actually talked to the tech department to say, like, do we really need to have kids online at the elementary level? Because, I've seen kindergarten kids, voice commanding inappropriate, not seen them, but heard about it, right? That they're voice commanding inappropriate things into the, computer. So even though with a lot of protections, I don't know, I mean, the kids are digital natives, they know how to get around things. I actually recently read an article Northeastern did just on sort of like the protections of social media, and I don't know if you're going to get to this, but, and they were, they did some research on it, and basically it's like, of all the protections that parents have access to for social media to protect the kids, it was about 17% of those protections actually work.
Wow.
Yeah, because they either don't work, or kids can easily get around it by putting the phone back to default mode or whatever it is, but they can get around it. And of the 17%, they said it's really not great. I mean, the only way it's really effective is if parents actually use it, right? So not all parents are using that 17% of the protective measures.
You were talking, and this is something for all of you because you're all dealing with it one way or the other, and I'll start with you and go this side. You talked about before the show, but you've talked about this before. It is so important for kids to have face-to-face time.
Yes.
And it's not just kids, because we talked about people having face-to-face
Right.
time. Talk a little about, because I think in a lot of ways, people hide behind the social media. Why is it so important for kids at a very young age to have that face-to-face time?
Well, I'm going to say so relationships are really important, and I think they're our biggest protective factor. And 55% of our communication, so that's the majority of our communication, is body language, and about 37% is tone of voice. So if you're just typing, right, so that leaves a very small percentage for words. And you can say, you could say the same words and have a very different meaning depending on your tone of voice and depending on your body language.
You mentioned that when we
Yeah.
were talking about during COVID. You mentioned that exact
Yeah.
same thing.
Yeah.
So
And so it's important, the thing is, if you're not having face-to-face conversations, you're not picking up those skills of being able to read somebody's body language, of being able to understand, those differences in tones. And so it becomes difficult to communicate effectively. I think the other thing is, if you're, just hiding behind a screen, people are a lot more brazen, I would say, and daring or whatever with the things that they say that they would never say face to face to somebody, because they would have to deal with the emotional response that they get from them.
And you talked about, like I said, when we were talking during COVID, you were saying too that people were having a tougher time dealing with the conversations because they weren't getting those.
Right.
And from what you're saying, it starts young and then it just gets worse as you get older.
Right. Without a doubt. And you did say you were going to go this way, so I don't want to cut it.
No, but I'm just
don't
following
wanna
up
cut
because you
anybody
mentioned
off.
that's why I'm saying.
But I will tell you this, one of the bigger things that I find is the bullying. You
Yes.
used to have bullying that would happen on the playground, but when you went home, you were safe. Unless the kid lived in the next house and was yelling out the window, Now, bullying is 24/7.
It's anonymous.
And it can be anonymous. It can be at a distance. Can be ugly. Sexting is become a major issue. Outing people for a variety of things is a major issue. But false claims is also a major issue. And how do you protect yourself? So that's and to the point that Dr. McKenzie was making, in terms of tone and body and everything else. Heck, just the other night I was at a business meeting, business dinner at night, and the wife thought I was taking her out to dinner, and so, you know, I apparently did not
Kill two birds with one
explain.
stone.
Kill me. And but she sent me a text message, and I literally, either I'm in a lot of trouble, or there's something else she's trying to say, and I responded with, "Am I in trouble here?" Literally, because I did not know the tone in which the message was sent.
Right.
You know, and she said, "No, why would you say that?"
And I think what I would add to it is very similar to your points. What we know from research is that our kids are forming really deep, intimate relationships with people that they've never met online very quickly, too. That process is happening more quickly than it might in person. And so we know that kind of leaves our kids at significant risk when they're meeting people online for the first time, when they're feeling like these are trusted individuals within, hours of a conversation.
What's even scarier is I was reading an article, I think in the Globe last week, about a woman who uses AI right now, and she's got a whole family just on AI, and it was scary. Her whole life is on AI.
The interesting thing is her online family is just as dysfunctional as her real life family.
Oh, you read the article?
I read the article too. But again, a 14-year-old took his own life because he had created with AI this whole fantasy of a relationship with Queen Daenerys. Is that it, from Game of Thrones?
Never saw the show. I got to be honest.
He was in love with the Queen, created this whole relationship with the AI, so that as he's texting, it's responding as the Queen in love with him. And long story short, an interaction, he was sad, he wanted to be with her. She said, "Come to me," and blah, 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 and Mom found, and they found that afterwards. It is, I think that's the thing that we want to share today. Be aware. Be aware of what your kids are doing. Be aware of any protections that can exist. Be aware of the fact that protections are not always going to work. But be aware. Conversations with our children is the best thing. Conversations with each other is the best thing we can do.
So what do you tell parents when you're dealing with them and about their children? And I'm sure obviously you're dealing with kids of all ages too.
We are,
So
right.
I guess the message can be tweaked depending on the age, but what are you telling parents?
So we have a whole digital safety curriculum that we can provide to parents if we're able to get in front of them. And our messaging really is to learn yourself about the technology that your kids are using so that you can be educated and so that you can have conversations with your children about using it effectively. So in 2025 and moving forward, it's unlikely that we're going to separate kids from technology. So what can we do to educate them about using it more safely before they even get technology, perhaps, right? There should be those conversations happening far younger than you as a parent might feel comfortable starting them. The same with sex education in general. All of those conversations, if you can start them before your children are in a position to take use of that knowledge, they'll be equipped to handle those situations more safely. So talk to your kids about strangers approaching them online, about red flags to look out for, about who the safe adults are in their life that they can come and talk to if someone is having inappropriate conversations with them on the internet. Having that safety net in person already established might help your kids. And then I also agree with the awareness, being aware that things may not work out perfectly. And I hate to advocate for it as somebody who did have a cell phone growing up and whose parents did this all the time, but looking through your kids' devices, having the opportunity to check through them, it feels awful for me to say, but I think kids' safety is far more paramount than their privacy.
Is there I hate to say it this way, but age appropriate number for getting a phone? I don't know the answer. I'm just.
There's one person that's been waiting for that question this whole interview. Okay.
Yeah, no.
Jim, 35 is where I'm starting and going up.
Yeah. No, I think and I said this at the last screening. I feel like we should not. I think that the elementary age kids should not have any access to any devices that access the internet. That's just my personal opinion. But the dangers are real. I think we should start introducing middle school students to how to go about using, the internet safely. I think they should pass a test, and then maybe, get a phone independent and I'll say a smartphone, because I think flip phones are still around. You want to give your middle school child a flip phone, great. But anything that accesses the internet, I say 16. That's when they start working.
We don't tend to give an age, but I agree with
Yeah.
a lot of the themes and principles.
Yeah.
That the more important thing is that the kids are educated beforehand, and that we sort of limit them in age-appropriate ways. So the younger kids are, I would agree, the less access that they should have to the internet, particularly unsupervised. But what does that look like in a home in 2025? Do people have smart TVs that they're using? Are kids trained to go on YouTube and put on a show when their parents are overwhelmed and need support? So rather than kind of giving a specific age or a cutoff, our perspective, I think, is again for that education and those conversations to be happening as early as possible. But I love the flip phone. We recommend that to parents all of the time. If you feel like your kid needs communication access for safety reasons or whatever it else may be, there are other ways to get it than a smartphone
Yeah.
that has absolutely unlimited access.
And I also, just to kind of piggyback on what you're saying about the age thing, right? So I'm giving an age, but really you want to think also about the developmental trajectory of a particular child, right? So I think about me when I was younger driving. You know, my parents let me drive earlier than, you know, probably they should have allowed me to. But, you know, at that age, I was mature, I was tall, you know, I was an athlete, I could handle the responsibility. But you wouldn't necessarily, you know, but even now there are kids that don't drive, that are of driving age, but they're just not ready to, you know.
yeah.
So I think you have to like think about is the child developmentally ready?
One thing, and I have no stats or anything to back it up, but just talking to young ladies, having two daughters or whatever, it seems, and maybe it's perception on my part, you can correct me, but it's tougher for girls than it is for boys, the social media bullying and the challenges that they face. I'll let you guys go at it, but it just seems that it's hard for them.
I do think there's a lot of standards with social media, and we talk about it a lot with Instagram in particular, but just a lot of unrealistic perceptions because people who maybe are content creators or spend a lot of time on these sites are able to project a really curated version of themselves, and then our young people, it can impact their self-esteem if they don't exactly
Oh, it's
match
huge.
that.
It's
all
huge
of
for
those
self-esteem
things.
for
Yeah.
girls because it gets
Yep.
it can get really tough. From again, from what I'm not on their sites, but just
Yeah.
having girls in the family, it can get really tough.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think it just kind of depends. It really depends because I teach human sexuality at Northeastern University, so I just recently had a student, a gay male student, who was talking about the pressures, social media pressures of that community, sort of on male imagery and you know, the male image in that community. So I do think it depends on what population you're talking about.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, girls can be very challenging, you know, and I would say socially tend to, you know, do that where they're leaving other, you know, they'll ostracize a girl
What
for
you
a
look
while.
like, what
Yeah.
you wear, how you talk, your hairdo. I mean, it
yep,
can
all of
be.
that.
I don't think. I mean, boys have their challenges, but I don't think it's that much.
In comparison.
Yeah, in
Yeah.
comparison.
I agree.
No. But I think boys face different challenges, right? Because, so now if you think about exposure to pornography, right? So now, and I don't know, you probably know the stat better than I do at this point, but the last I had read, it was like average age of exposure to pornography is age 9.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
Wow.
And, yeah, age 9. So you've got, and it's, you know, boys are going to probably access pornography sooner than girls. That might be changing. But you know, you've got this early exposure to pornography, and then what ends up happening is, and what we've seen also at the high school level, right, is boys now, you know, pressuring girls to send pictures and whatnot. Then they're sending them to all their friends. Now there's this sexploitation, you know, thing that's going on where, you know, girls have had their pictures exposed, you know, to
Right.
a broader population. So, so those are, and I think there's the social pressures with boys to like, hey, can you get that, you know, that kind of stuff that goes on that I think is problematic in its own right, you know, because you can end up with, you know, felony charges of child distribution
Yeah.
of pornography.
And the
that,
state,
you know,
the legislature's
yeah.
taken action against that.
Yeah.
We got less than 5 minutes left, but I want to give each of you like a minute, sort of just to sort of wrap it up in your thoughts on for help or whatever what you want to do, and maybe some contact information for people.
Well, I'll let them give contact information and everything else. I think the one thing that I would say is, again, it's not about raising fear, it's about raising awareness and helping people be prepared. I think a parent should have early conversations with their children. This is something that comes with responsibility when they give them the phone, whatever age you're going to do it. It comes with responsibility and accountability. And, you know, there's different things that you can use. Figure out what they are. People will teach you. You know, my daughter-in-law has a limit. My granddaughters can only be on for X amount of hours. That's built in. And in order for them to get more time, they got to ask their mother, who can release more time for them to be able to access the internet or anything else. They can do something like read their books if it's downloaded, or make calls. But accessing content, there's a limit. Let's teach our kids limits again.
Yeah.
You know, and let's not, but make that conversation up front, you know.
Sam?
Yeah, so I would agree. I think there's some good resources out there for caregivers to read into parental controls and all of those different types of things. We recommend NetSmarts by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children a lot. They have resource guides for parents that they can just download. So talk early, talk often, educate yourselves as much as possible, and reach out to somebody, I guess, if you have questions, because a lot of times our parents aren't as tech savvy as maybe someone else in their life is. So involving the people around them, we would definitely recommend. And you can reach out to us at the Children's Advocacy Center. We have a whole team between our mental health team, our education team, and the rest of us there at the CAC available if people have questions about that.
Yeah, so I'll just talk about the schools, right? There's counselors in all the schools. And so if parents, and I agree with everything already said, but if parents, you know, would like to have additional resources or need help finding resources, you know, the school department can help with that. And the other thing that I'll mention is that a lot of times, regardless of how wonderful your relationship is with your child, kids don't necessarily want to talk to their parents about certain things, right? And so, and that's a phenomenon I've seen for many years, right? I've been working with children and families for 30 years. And you know, kids don't want to talk to their parents about it for a variety of reasons. And so, just to not be afraid to reach out to have your child talk to somebody else about it, because oftentimes what I'll do when I'm seeing a kid, I'll say, do you want me to help you tell your parents about this, right? This is an important thing. I'll help you talk to them about it. Yeah. And it's just important, because I think in terms of particularly when we're thinking about suicide prevention, right? We want everyone to have somebody that they feel safe talking to.
Yeah.
You know?
Trusted adult.
Yeah, trusted adult.
Right.
Well, lots to go, lots of good advice there. I thank you all for coming in and talking about it, and we'll certainly be talking about this down the future, because I don't think technology is going to slow down, so things are going to change.
Absolutely.
No, it won't.
But thank you for having us.
Yeah.
I appreciate it all. That's going to do it for this edition of A Conversation With. I'm Jim Marshall of the New Bedford Cable Network. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you again soon.